how my life ended with "had I known." In the heart of Ibadan, where the sun kisses the red earth and the winds whisper secrets through the ancient cocoa trees, I was born into the proud household of Baba Odetala. My father, a respected farmer, tilled the land with hands hardened by years of toil, his sweat watering the same soil that fed us. My mother, a skilled weaver, wove the finest Adaya cloth, her hands dancing with the threads of fate. I was their only son, Adebola, the child of their prayers, the light of their old age. They called me Anu Oloran, the mercy of God, for they had waited long for my arrival. And oh, how they rejoiced over me. Baba would lift me high above his head, his laughter echoing across the compound, while Mama would sing songs of gratitude, her voice carrying our joy to the heavens. Life was simple, but it was full of love. From childhood, I had everything I needed but not everything I wanted. My father always said, "Ede, Omomi, patience is the wealth of the wise." But patience was bitter to a young heart yearning for the sweetness of the world. While I helped Baba on the farm and watched Mama weave patterns as intricate as destiny itself, my mind wandered beyond the hills of our village. The world outside our compound was full of men who had no patience yet rode in golden chariots. I wanted that life, the one I saw in the traders from Lagos who passed through our village, their clothes rich, their pockets heavy with money. I dreamed of a life where my hands did not have to dig into the soil, where my days were not measured by the sun's position in the sky but by the weight of gold in my pocket. Then came Te, my childhood friend, who had left our village as a boy and returned as a man of wealth. He arrived in a gleaming car, dressed in fine clothes, speaking with the arrogance of city men. He laughed at my father's old ways, his words like poison wrapped in honey. "Adebola, this farming life will kill you before your time. Come with me to Lagos, and I will show you true wealth." At first, I hesitated, for Baba's warnings lingered in my heart. But when I saw how our neighbors admired Te, how they whispered about his success, the temptation grew unbearable. I imagined myself returning one day, dressed in riches, proving to the world that I was more than just a farmer's son. And so, against the cries of my mother and the silent sorrow in my father's eyes, I left. Lagos was everything and nothing like I had imagined. The lights were bright, but the shadows were darker. Te introduced me to powerful men, and at first, money came easily, too easily. I wore the finest clothes, ate the richest meals, and sent gifts home to my parents, hoping to silence their worries. But soon, I realized the wealth was not from honest labor. It came with a price. "Your hands must touch blood before you touch true wealth," an elder with sunken eyes told me one night. Fear clawed at my throat, but greed had already wrapped its chains around my soul. I ignored the screams in my conscience and crossed a line I could never return from. The wealth I chased soon turned to dust. My body grew weak, my hands trembled, and no medicine could heal me. The spirits of those I wronged whispered my name in the wind, and no amount of money could silence them. In my final days, I crawled back to Ibadan, a shadow of the proud boy who once left. Baba's once strong shoulders had become hunched with age and sorrow. Mama, once full of songs, now had only tears. They took me in, their love unshaken despite my sins, but it was too late. Under the mango tree where I once played, I lay weak, my breath shallow. As the sun set on my life, I whispered my last words, "Had I known." But the dead do not get second chances. Lagos was a different world, bright lights that never dimmed, endless noise that never faded, and a hunger that swallowed men whole. At first, it was everything I had dreamed of. Te welcomed me with open arms, dressed me in fine clothes, and introduced me to powerful men whose mere presence commanded fear. I sent money home, and my mother's voice trembled with joy when she blessed me over the phone. My father, however, remained silent. He never asked where the money came from, but his silence carried 1,000 questions. "A day, where a man's wealth comes from matters more than the wealth itself," he once told me. I ignored him. Wealth was wealth, and I was finally living the life I had always wanted. But then, the truth unraveled before me like an old, tattered cloth. Tay's wealth was not from sweat and hard work, it was from blood. I should have turned back the moment I realized it, but the promise of riches had already sunk its claws into me. One night, he took me to a secret gathering, a place where men whispered in hushed tones and shadows danced against flickering candlelight. An elder with darkened lips and eyes like a vulture placed a calabash before me. "Your hands must touch blood before you touch true wealth," he said, his voice as cold as harmattan wind. My heart pounded like a talking drum. My father's teachings, my mother's prayers, the laughter of my childhood, they all flashed before me. I wanted to run. I wanted to return to Boba's farm, to Momo's warm embrace, to the innocence of my village. But then, Tay's voice echoed in my head, "Poverty is worse than death." And so, I stayed. That night, I crossed a line I could never return from. At first, the money flowed like the ocean river after the rains. I bought cars, wore the finest clothes, and lived in a house grander than the palace of our village king. When I returned home for the first time in 2 years, there was a grand celebration. My mother wept tears of joy as she danced, thanking the gods for blessing her son. My father, however, simply watched me, his eyes filled with an unspoken sorrow. "You have returned with wealth, but have you returned with peace?" he asked. I laughed, thinking he was simply an old man who did not understand the ways of the world. I did not know then that he saw what I refused to acknowledge, the emptiness in my soul. With each passing day, my wealth grew, but my spirit withered. The spirits of those I had wronged whispered my name in the night. No matter how high I built my walls, their voices crawled in through the cracks. My dreams were haunted by shadowy figures, my hands stained with a blood that refused to wash away. The food that once tasted sweet turned to ash in my mouth. The women, the parties, the riches, they no longer filled the void inside me. Then came the sickness. My hands began to shake, my body burned with an illness no medicine could cure. I spent millions seeking treatment, traveling from one hospital to another, but the doctors had no answers. My wealth could buy me everything, everything but peace, everything but time. And so, I returned home, broken and dying. Boba, now frail and aged beyond his years, sat me under the mango tree where I once played as a boy. Mama wept, calling on the gods to save me, but even the gods turn away from those who trade their souls for riches. I lay there, staring at the sky, as the setting sun painted the heavens in hues of orange and gold. My breath grew shallow, my vision blurred, and in that final moment, only 3 words escaped my lips, "Had I known." But the dead do not get second chances. I crawled back to Ibadan, a shadow of the proud boy who once left, the weight of my sins heavier than the riches I once flaunted. My once strong legs, which had carried me away in arrogance, now trembled with every step. The village I had abandoned welcomed me not with scorn, but with sorrow. The moment Boba and Mama saw me, their cries filled the air, a wail of pain deeper than any words could express. My mother, who had once danced in celebration of my success, now clung to my frail body, rocking me as though she could cradle time itself and undo my mistakes. My father, the man whose wisdom I had dismissed, placed his shaking hands on my head, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Ade, why didn't you listen?" His once fiery eyes, which had watched over me with pride, were now dulled by grief. Under the mango tree where I once played as a child, where Boba had told me stories of warriors and wise men, I lay weak, the sun kissing my face for the last time. The tree, once a witness to my laughter, now bore silent witness to my suffering. My mother called upon the gods, pleaded with the earth, begged the winds to return her son to her, but fate is deaf to the cries of a grieving mother. The wealth I had chased, the gold I had worshipped, could not buy me another moment with them. The breeze carried the scent of home, of roasted corn, of fresh rain on the earth, of Momo's cooking, but it was distant now, as if I no longer belonged to this world. My breath was shallow, my vision blurred, and the faces of my loved ones became shadows in the fading light. My father held my hand, my mother's tears wet my skin, and with the last of my strength, I whispered the words that had haunted me for years, had I known. But the dead do not get second chances. My mother's cries rose to the heavens, my father's silence spoke of a pain no man should endure. The villagers gathered, mourning the boy who had once run through the streets with dreams in his eyes. There would be no grand celebration, no feast, no songs of joy, only the sorrow of parents burying their only son. As they laid me to rest beneath the mango tree, the winds whispered through its branches, carrying my story to the generations that would come after me. Let them hear, let them learn, let them not walk the path that led me here.